The clock on the wall ticks with an aggressive, rhythmic indifference. It is 3:14 a.m. The room is steeped in the bruised purple hue of twilight, a space where the shadows grow long and predatory. A figure sits at a desk, the pale, artificial glow of a laptop screen illuminating a face etched with the weariness of 1,000 prayers. Before them lie the remnants of the work. Half-filled journals, tattered books on the mechanics of manifestation, and a sticky note that reads, "I am enough," a phrase that once felt like a lifeline but now feels like an insult. Outside, the world is silent, but inside the mind, the noise is deafening. There is a frantic energy here, a palpable, vibrating tension. This is the weight of trying. It is a heavy, leaden cloak that the seeker wears like armor, believing that if they can just tighten the straps, if they can just visualize the texture of the dream with enough microscopic detail, the universe will finally be bullied into submission. Observe the paradox. They have spent years mastering the language of light, yet they live in the architecture of lack. They have spent hours in meditative silence, yet their mind is a chaotic battlefield of what-ifs and if-onlys. The air in the room is stale, thick with the scent of unfulfilled potential. They close their eyes, squeezing their eyelids until pinpricks of light dance in the dark, and they force themselves to feel to manufacture a sense of abundance that refuses to take root. They are not merely waiting for their miracle. They are performing a frantic, high-stakes surgery on their own psyche, convinced that if they stop working for one heartbeat, the entire fragile illusion of their future will collapse into dust. It is a tragedy of intensity. They treat their desire not as an inheritance, but as a ghost they are desperate to catch. And in the corner, the shadow of their doubt grows, nourished by the very effort they believe is fueling their success. To understand the pathology of this struggle, one must first deconstruct the fundamental error, the belief that one is a creator, operating in a vacuum, tasked with the Herculean labor of pulling a reality into existence from nothingness. Why does this effort produce the exact inverse of what is desired? The answer lies in the physics of the human consciousness. Every act of trying is, by definition, a confession of absence. When one exerts effort to become something, one reinforces the subconscious conclusion that one is not that thing. If you are already the master of the house, you do not need to try to occupy it. You simply exist within it. The exertion of effort is a signal to the deep mind that the distance between the current self and the desired self is not only real but significant. It is a psychological barrier that prevents the integration of the identity. How, then, does this manifest as a law? Think of consciousness as a frequency tuner. The universe does not respond to your affirmations, which are merely words. It responds to your vibration, your fundamental underlying state of being. When you try to feel wealthy, you are broadcasting a frequency of lack of wealth. You are essentially telling the mirror of existence, "I am currently empty, and I am using these tools to fill the void." Because the universe is a faithful, impartial servant, a mirror that has no will of its own. It reflects that state of filling the void back to you by providing you with more things to fill, more gaps to bridge, and more reasons to keep struggling. The struggle is not a catalyst for the miracle. It is the fuel for the status quo. To try is to remain stuck in the mechanics of the illusion. It is the ego's way of maintaining control, creating a loop where the seeker is perpetually in the process of becoming but never arriving. The recursive loop is vicious. The more you try, the more you perceive failure. The more you perceive failure, the more you try to correct it. The solution is not more intensity, it is the radical, quiet surrender of the effort itself. One must ask, what if the miracle does not require the sweat of the brow, but the stillness of the heart? What if the work has already been done in the infinite, and your only task is to step through the door that has been standing open all along? In a land far removed from our own, there lived a sculptor named Elian. He was a man of immense talent, obsessed with the legend of the living stone, a mythic block of marble said to contain the perfect form of whatever the artisan desired. Elian spent his entire life in a dusty, sun-drenched workshop, his hands perpetually cracked and bleeding from the relentless friction of the chisel. He wanted to carve the form of his own destiny. Every morning he would stand before a massive slab of marble, his eyes burning with intent. He would strike the stone, shouting commands at it, forcing his vision into the cold, hard rock. He worried constantly. If he missed a day of carving, he feared the stone would harden further. If a piece chipped away in the wrong place, he would weep, seeing it as a sign of his own unworthiness. He spent decades trying to carve the statue. He was exhausted, his hair turned white prematurely, and the workshop was filled with piles of shattered, misshapen fragments, the debris of his own frantic, misguided efforts. One evening, an old blind traveler stopped at his door. The traveler watched Elian for a moment, then spoke with a voice that sounded like shifting sands. "You have been carving for a lifetime, yet the marble remains stone. Why?" Elian, wiping sweat from his brow, replied, "It is the stone. It is stubborn. I have not been strong enough. I have not been worthy enough to force it into the shape I need." The traveler stepped forward and placed his calloused hands on the slab. He did not pick up the chisel. He did not scream. He simply stood there, breathing in the stillness of the room. "You are not a creator, Elian," the traveler whispered. "You are a seeker. You treat the marble as a thing to be conquered. But the statue is not in your hands. It is already within the stone. It has always been within the stone. You were not sent here to create the form. You were sent here to reveal it, by removing what does not belong." The traveler walked away, leaving Elian in the silence. That night, Elian did not pick up his hammer. He sat before the block, and for the first time he did not look at the marble as an obstacle. He looked at it as a companion. He stopped trying to force the form. He simply acknowledged that the statue existed. He felt the weight of it, the reality of it, and he breathed into the conviction that he was merely the one permitted to witness its emergence. The next morning, the chisel moved not with the violence of a soldier, but with the grace of a surgeon. The marble seemed to yield, not because it was being destroyed, but because it was being invited to change. Elian realized the truth. The struggle had been his own shadow, blocking the light from the masterpiece he had been desperate to possess. The transition from the seeker of effort to the heir of acceptance begins with a simple, quiet realization. You are not a construction worker building a house in a vacuum. You are a tenant returning home. To apply this today, we must practice the art of the inertial pause. Whenever you feel that familiar tightness in your chest, that frantic urge to fix your bank account, your relationships, or your health, stop. Physically stop. Place your hand over your heart and consciously release the urge to solve. Say to yourself, "The work is finished. My good is already prepared in the divine mind. I am not trying to create, I am accepting." Do not look for evidence in the physical world yet. The physical world is merely the echo of yesterday's thoughts. Instead, look for the feeling of naturalness. If you already possessed your heart's desire, would you be frantic? Would you be checking the mailbox every 5 minutes? No. You would be at peace. You would be carrying the quiet, steady confidence of one who knows where their next meal is coming from. That peace is your new North Star. If this reflection has begun to untangle the knots of struggle in your own life, I invite you to click the like button below. Let this be your first quiet act of surrender, a signal to your subconscious that you are ready to stop fighting the stone and start revealing the statue. You are now standing at the threshold of a great unlocking. You have begun to see the mirror for what it is, and you have realized that the tools of your past, the striving, the screaming, the intense and desperate yearning, are the very things that have kept your inheritance at bay. But there is a deeper mystery at play. You have accepted that you are not the builder, but the heir. Yet, what happens when the world around you continues to play the old script? What happens when the shadows of your past refuse to retreat, even when you have turned your back on them? In the next chapter, we shall explore the mechanics of the mirror and learn how to hold your ground when reality itself seems determined to test your resolve. The banquet is set, the table is cleared, and the guest of honor is already walking through the door. Are you prepared to receive what has already been given? The gala is in full swing, yet the guest of honor remains frozen at the threshold, clutching a tattered, worn-out invitation as if it were a shield. The air is thick with the aroma of roasted herbs, the chime of crystal flutes, and the low melodic murmur of 100 contented souls. The banquet hall is a masterpiece of light and geometry, where every detail from the placement of the silverware to the soft golden warmth of the candles speaks of a celebration that is not beginning, but is already unfolding in its zenith. Our guest stands in the shadow of the grand archway. They are dressed in rags, caked with the dust of a long, arduous journey. They look at the feast before them, the abundance, the laughter, the life they have spent their entire existence dreaming of, and they are trembling. They are not waiting for the doors to open. The doors have been swinging wide for an eternity. They are not waiting for an invitation. Their name is engraved in gold upon a place card at the head of the table. The paradox here is as piercing as a sudden winter frost. The guest is starving, yet the food is already prepared. They are cold, yet the hearth is roaring. They are profoundly lonely, yet they are surrounded by the very destiny they have chased across continents. Why does the guest not walk forward? Why do they stand at the edge of the light, peering in with eyes clouded by the suspicion that they are an intruder? It is because they believe the banquet is a reward to be earned, rather than a home to be inhabited. They are so consumed by the effort of becoming worthy that they have become blind to the fact that they have already arrived. To understand why the guest refuses to enter the banquet, we must deconstruct the psychological prison of preparation. The ego, that masterful architect of our limitations, loves the concept of the process. It tells us that we must suffer, learn, perform, and earn before we can be granted access to the life we desire. But this is the fundamental lie of the materialist paradigm. Why does the ego demand a process? Because the ego thrives on the concept of time. If the dream is already finished, then time is obsolete, and the ego loses its primary purpose, the management of the struggle. By insisting that we are preparing for our good, the ego secures its own survival. It creates a recursive loop. We strive because we are not yet there, and we are not yet there because we are still striving. How do we break this cycle? We must shift our philosophical alignment from the linear to the circular. In the linear worldview, you are at point A, and your desire is at point B. You must bridge the gap with doing. In the circular divine worldview, the end is contained in the beginning. The seed already contains the oak. The symphony is already written in the silence before the first note. The core principle here is acceptance of identity. We do not become the person who has the dream. We adopt the consciousness of the one for whom the dream is a natural, boring, and inevitable fact. If you were a sovereign, you would not spend your morning wondering if you were a sovereign. You would not affirm your royalty to the mirror for an hour to convince your reflection. You would simply possess the ease of one who has never known anything else. Why do we fail at this? Because we treat our good as a visitor we must entertain, rather than a guest who is already seated at our table. We attempt to manufacture the feeling of having, which is a subtle form of agitation. When you try to feel wealthy, you are essentially vibrating at the frequency of anticipation. Anticipation is the opposite of possession. To possess is to be still. To possess is to be bored by the presence of the thing you once chased. How do we move from the frantic agitation of the seeker to the heavy, calm silence of the owner? We stop trying to manifest and begin resting in the fact. In the archives of a forgotten kingdom, there is a record of a young man named Cassian. Cassian was the long-lost heir to the throne, though he had been raised in the mud of the outer provinces, working as a simple charcoal burner. He knew nothing of his lineage. His life was defined by the soot on his hands, the bitter cold of winter, and the constant gnawing anxiety of not knowing if he would have enough to survive the week. One day, a royal herald arrived in his village, carrying a scroll sealed with the king's own signet. The scroll was a decree. Cassian was the true heir. The throne was empty, the coronation was prepared, and the treasury was overflowing in his name. Cassian read the letter, and a strange, terrifying transformation began. At first, he tried to act like a king while still in the mud. He would stand straight while chopping wood, attempting to project the feeling of royalty. He would speak in clipped, authoritative tones to his goats, trying to practice his future decrees. He was, in his own mind, preparing to be king. But the more he tried, the more foolish he looked to the villagers. The more he forced the feeling, the heavier the soot seemed to cling to his skin. He felt like a fraud. He felt like he was playing a game of pretend. The herald returned, watching the boy struggle under the weight of his own performance. "Cassian," he said, "you are acting as if the throne is a distant land you must march toward. You are acting as if you are a beggar who has been given a costume. But look at your hands. They are the hands of a king, even if they are covered in dust. The throne is not in the capital, it is in your blood. You do not need to become the king. You only need to stop being the charcoal burner." Cassian dropped the wood. He stopped practicing for the throne. Instead, he did something radical. He began to live as if the war was over and the peace was already secured. He didn't speak as a king. He spoke as a man who had nothing to fear. He didn't carry himself with the pomp of a ruler. He carried himself with the simple, quiet, unshakable certainty of a man who was already home. The transition was not in his actions, it was in his permission. He gave himself permission to stop the labor of getting and start the life of having. And as he walked toward the capital, the world itself seemed to rearrange its patterns to acknowledge the sovereign who had finally accepted his crown. To integrate this truth into your own life, you must identify your charcoal burner rags. What are you still wearing? What habits of trying are you still clinging to, even though you have been told the inheritance is yours? Today, practice the principle of the already. Choose one area of your life where you feel the most lack, be it your finances, your health, or your sense of purpose. Instead of visualizing the future where this is solved, anchor your consciousness in the present where it is finished. Imagine yourself sitting in the banquet hall of your own life. Do not look for the excitement of the arrival. Look for the boredom of the possession. If you had the money, you would not be checking your bank balance with trembling hands. You would be considering what to do with your afternoon. That is your state. The calm, mundane, unshakable confidence of someone who has no need to look for what they already possess. If this realization that you are already the heir and that the banquet is already set has brought a sense of relief to your spirit, I invite you to subscribe to this journey. By joining us, you are signaling to your inner landscape that you are no longer a visitor in your own life, but the one who has finally taken their seat at the table. You have begun to see that the struggle was merely a costume, a remnant of a story that no longer belongs to you. But even as you sit at the table, there is a mirror in the room, a mirror that will attempt to show you the old world, the world of the charcoal burner. How do you handle the reflection when the mirror shows you a reality that does not match your new identity? How do you remain unmoved when the shadows of your past attempt to crowd the table? The answers lie in the mechanics of the law itself, and in the next chapter, we shall walk together through the mirror and learn how to hold your gaze until the reflection is forced to change. The feast is ready. Do not let the shadow tell you otherwise. The bathroom is cast in a cold, unforgiving, clinical light. A man stands before the porcelain-framed mirror, his brow furrowed into a landscape of deep, anxious lines. He is attempting to force a transformation. He has been told that if he smiles, his life will change. If he holds the expression of joy, the reality of his suffering will dissolve. He pulls at the corners of his mouth, his eyes tight with a desperate, frantic intensity. He stares into his own pupils, trying to find the spark of a man who is loved, who is wealthy, who is free. But the mirror is a cruel, indifferent witness. It reflects exactly what it sees. A man who is scowling, a man who is fighting, a man who is terrified. The harder he tries to contort his features into a mask of triumph, the more strained and grotesque the reflection becomes. This is the central, bitter paradox of the seeker. They stand before the mirror of life, demanding that the reflection show them a king, while their internal state is that of a pauper. They believe that if they can just hold the mask long enough, the glass will eventually crack and reveal a new world, but the mirror has no will of its own. It does not possess the capacity for empathy, nor does it have a memory of what you wish to be. It is a perfect, neutral servant. It can only repeat what is already present in the source. As long as the man stands there with a brow furrowed by the desire for change, the mirror will continue to present a man who is in the process of wanting. The more he screams at the reflection to change, the more the reflection screams back, trapped in the rigid, unyielding logic of the physical echo. To understand the mechanics of the mirror, we must first accept the nature of the echo. We live in a world that operates on a delayed feedback loop. Your current circumstances are not the product of your current thoughts. They are the physical manifestations of your past states of being. They are, quite literally, the light of stars that have already burned out. Why does the ego struggle to grasp this? Because the ego is time-bound. It observes the effect and treats it as the cause. It looks at the empty bank account and declares, "I am poor." It looks at the solitude and declares, "I am lonely." It mistakes the echo for the original sound. How then does the principle of the mirror of divine law function? It operates on the principle of radical consistency. If you wish to change the reflection, you must change the source. But the source is not an action, it is a frequency. If you stand before the mirror of life, with a heart heavy with the fear of lack, you are broadcasting a frequency that the universe, the mirror, must fulfill. The universe does not hear your words, it feels your vibration. If you say, "I am prosperous," but your chest is tight with the vibration of "I am afraid," the mirror will look past your words and reflect your fear. It is a law of mathematical precision. Why do we fail at this? We fail because we are addicted to the input of our senses. We let the world tell us who we are. We look at the yesterday of our lives, the bills, the broken relationships, the physical pain, and we allow these echoes to dictate our today. We are constantly observing the effect and becoming the cause. To break this, we must adopt the philosophy of the unmoved mover. We must learn to stand before the mirror and maintain our internal state even when the reflection is screaming the opposite. This is not delusion, it is the highest form of reality. It is the understanding that when you change your signal, the mirror must reset. It is not a miracle, it is a mechanism. To embody this truth today, you must cultivate the practice of the detached witness. The next time you encounter a circumstance that triggers your fear, a bill that arrives, a door that remains closed, a silence that feels heavy, do not react. Do not try to fix it with the tools of the old fearful self. Instead, observe it as you would observe a shadow on the floor. A shadow is real in that it exists, but it has no substance. It cannot touch you. It can only follow where you lead. Speak to your reflection with the authority of the lighthouse keeper. When your eyes see the lack, say quietly, "This is yesterday's news. It is an echo. My reality is already being rewritten in the frequency of my current conviction." Do not demand that the world change immediately. Stand in your truth, hold your light steady, and watch how the world, like a faithful mirror, begins to pivot to match the new signal you are sending. If you are ready to stop fighting the shadows and start shining your light, I invite you to leave a comment below with the words, "I am the lighthouse. The storm is the echo." By doing so, you anchor this new identity in the physical world, making it a part of your public declaration. You have begun to understand that the mirror is not your master but your servant. You have learned that the struggle is only the friction of the old echo fading away. But what happens when the silence of the room, or the stillness of your own heart, begins to feel like a void? What happens when the middle space, the time between your shift in consciousness and the arrival of the physical evidence, becomes unbearable? We have touched upon the mirror, but we have yet to master the radio dial. In the next chapter, we shall explore how to tune your frequency so precisely that the universe has no choice but to broadcast your new reality. The signal is being sent, and the world is already beginning to tune in. To embody this truth today, you must cultivate the practice of the detached witness. The next time you encounter a circumstance that triggers your fear, a bill that arrives, a door that remains closed, a silence that feels heavy, do not react. Do not try to fix it with the tools of the old fearful self. Instead, observe it as you would observe a shadow on the floor. A shadow is real in that it exists, but it has no substance. It cannot touch you. It can only follow where you lead. Speak to your reflection with the authority of the lighthouse keeper. When your eyes see the lack, say quietly, "This is yesterday's news. It is an echo. My reality is already being rewritten in the frequency of my current conviction." Do not demand that the world change immediately. Stand in your truth, hold your light steady, and watch how the world, like a faithful mirror, begins to pivot to match the new signal you are sending. If you are ready to stop fighting the shadows and start shining your light, I invite you to leave a comment below with the words, "I am the lighthouse. The storm is the echo." By doing so, you anchor this new identity in the physical world, making it a part of your public declaration. You have begun to understand that the mirror is not your master, but your servant. You have learned that the struggle is only the friction of the old echo fading away. But what happens when the silence of the room or the stillness of your own heart begins to feel like a void? What happens when the middle space, the time between your shift in consciousness and the arrival of the physical evidence, becomes unbearable? We have touched upon the mirror, but we have yet to master the radio dial. In the next chapter, we shall explore how to tune your frequency so precisely that the universe has no choice but to broadcast your new reality. The signal is being sent, and the world is already beginning to tune in. The stage is draped in heavy velvet curtains that smell of age, dust, and the lingering electricity of 1,000 performances. Backstage, the air is thick, with the scent of grease paint, spirit gum, and the frantic, shallow breath of an actor who is about to make their entrance. In their hands, they grip a costume, an elaborate, weighted robe of crushed crimson velvet, embroidered with golden threads that catch the dim amber light. It is the robe of a sovereign, a garment of such profound gravity that, at first touch, it feels like an anchor. The actors' hands tremble. They look at their own reflection in a cracked vanity mirror, a reflection of a nervous, ordinary person, pale and shivering, and they see a fraud. The paradox is absolute. The role is grand, yet the person feels hollow. To put on the robe is to invite the gaze of the audience, and in the silence of the dressing room, the ego whispers a terrifying indictment. They will see through you. You are not a king. You are a pauper in silk. You are a lie waiting to be exposed. The stage hands, the harsh realities of life begin to move the props. The thunder machine starts its low, ominous rumble. The cues are coming, and the script is already set in motion. The actor stands on the brink of a transformation, paralyzed by the gap between the person they currently feel like and the sovereign they must become. If they step onto the stage before they have fully inhabited the character, the performance will be thin, brittle, and unconvincing. Yet, if they wait for the feeling of royalty to strike them, they will miss their cue entirely. The stage is set, the audience is waiting, and the lights are blindingly bright. How does one walk from the wings of uncertainty into the spotlight of a destiny that feels, for all intents and purposes, like a stage play? To grasp the nature of the actor's dilemma, we must deconstruct the psychological mechanism of the state. Most people assume that feeling is a spontaneous emotional reaction to external stimuli. They wait for success to feel successful. They wait for love to feel lovable. This is the logic of the spectator. But the sovereign, the master of the stage, operates from a reverse polarity. Why does the ego demand that we feel before we act? The ego seeks safety. It equates the unknown with danger. If you act as a sovereign before you have the feeling of a sovereign, you risk the judgment of the world, and by extension, the destruction of the ego's protective shell. The ego prefers to keep you in the rags of the struggle because the rags are safe. They are the familiar, the proven, the expected. How, then, does one override this protective instinct? We use the method of recursive immersion. We must realize that the feeling of the role is not a precursor to the performance. It is the result of the occupation. If you study the psychology of the great masters, you find a common thread. They do not wait for the emotion to arise. They cultivate the environment that makes the emotion inevitable. Why is it so difficult? Because of the phenomenon of the period of the fraud. When you begin to occupy a new identity, a new frequency on your internal radio dial, there is always a lag between your internal state and the external manifestation. During this transition, your inner dialogue will scream, "You are pretending!" You must understand that this scream is not a sign of failure. It is the sound of your old identity dying. It is the friction of the new garment stretching to fit your soul. How do we move through this? We must adopt the role of the method actor of our own lives. A method actor does not merely recite lines. They inhabit the reality of the character until the character's heartbeat becomes their own. They breathe, move, and think from the position of the role. When the world presents you with a prop, a bill, an argument, a moment of solitude, the method actor does not react as the old self would. They react as the sovereign would. This is not acting in the sense of being untruthful. It is acting in the sense of choosing which reality you wish to inhabit. By refusing to step out of character, even when the stage hands are rearranging the scenery, the role eventually ceases to be a performance and becomes your essential nature. The crown, once heavy, becomes as natural as the air you breathe. In the annals of the High Kingdom of Ethelgard, it was said that the young King Valerius was not born to the throne. He was a foundling, a child of the stables, thrust into the royal chambers when the true line of succession perished in a sudden, tragic winter. When he was crowned, he was barely 15, his shoulders thin, his eyes wide with the terror of a child who had seen too much shadow and not enough light. The court was a viper's nest of noblemen who knew he was a fraud. They watched him like hawks, waiting for him to stumble, to speak with the coarse accent of the stables, to show the fear that gnawed at his gut. Valerius knew that if he walked as a child, he would be devoured. So, he took a vow of silence regarding his past. He went to the royal tailor and had a mask forged, a mask of gold, with eyes that remained cold and piercing, and a mouth set in an expression of eternal, regal calm. For the first year, it was pure agony. He felt like a boy playing a game. Every time he sat on the throne, his legs shook under the heavy robes. When he held the scepter, his palms sweated. He felt the fraudulence in every breath, but he refused to take off the mask. He walked through the halls with the slow, deliberate stride of a giant. He spoke only in the measured, rhythmic tones of his predecessors. He sat at the council table and listened, absorbing the nuance of every argument, forcing his mind to process them not as a boy, but as the final authority of the realm. He was acting. But as the seasons turned, a strange alchemy occurred. The mask began to define the face beneath it. The way he walked forced his muscles to align with the stride of a ruler. The way he spoke forced his mind to think with the clarity of a judge. One morning he looked in the mirror to adjust his crown and realized that the boy from the stables was gone. He was not playing the king. The king had simply moved into the space the boy had vacated. The throne was no longer a prop. It was his center of gravity. He had survived the period of the fraud, not by being real from the start, but by being committed to the act of reality until reality surrendered to him. To integrate this truth, you must identify your iron mask. What is the version of yourself that you are afraid to step into? Is it the version of you who is secure, loved, and prosperous? Today, stop waiting to feel that version of yourself before you act. The feeling is a tail-end emotion. It follows the action, not the other way around. In your interactions today, play the role. If you are in a situation where you feel small, act as the sovereign. Maintain the posture. Speak with the composure of one who knows they are the final authority in their own life. If your mind screams you are a fraud, simply smile behind your mask. Acknowledge that the transition is necessary. You are not deceiving the world. You are showing the world who you have chosen to be. You are the architect of your own performance, and the universe is the audience that will eventually provide the standing ovation. If you are ready to put on the robe and step into the light of your true role, I invite you to declare it in the comments. I am in character. The performance is my reality. By doing so, you affirm your commitment to the sovereign within, marking this as the moment you ceased to be the spectator and began to be the star. You have begun to understand that the fake it till you make it adage is not a strategy of deception, but a strategy of occupancy. You are filling the space of your destiny until your consciousness has no room for the old rags. But the stage is vast, and the script contains many scenes. There are moments when the stagehands, the mundane, boring, and utterly ordinary circumstances of life will threaten to pull you back into the wings. How do you maintain the persona of the sovereign when you are doing nothing more glamorous than washing the dishes or paying the rent? In the next chapter, we shall unveil the secret of the restored afternoon, where the true work of the universe is performed in the quiet, uncelebrated spaces of the everyday. The rehearsal is over. The show has begun. The sun hangs suspended in the golden hour, casting long, honeyed fingers across a room that smells faintly of rain and old books. It is Tuesday. It is entirely, aggressively ordinary. There is no thunderous applause, no sudden flash of divine light, no dramatic crescendo signaling that the seeker has reached the mountaintop. Instead, there is the hum of a refrigerator, the distant, muffled sound of a neighbor's lawnmower, and the rhythmic scratching of a pen on paper. In this room, the seeker sits not in a throne, not in a temple, but on a well-worn sofa, perhaps nursing a cup of tea that has gone lukewarm. They are trying to manifest a life of grandeur. Yet here they are, caught in the doldrums of the mundane. The paradox is as sharp as a splinter. We have been taught to chase the lightning, to crave the seismic shift. Yet we forget that life is composed of 99% ordinary Tuesday afternoons. If you are waiting for the ecstasy of a miracle to prove you have succeeded, you are waiting for a dream that will never arrive. The ego demands the spectacle, the cinematic explosion of the big win, because it wants to be entertained. But truth, the deep, resonant, and foundational truth of your inheritance, does not live in the explosion. It lives in the silence that follows. It lives in the restored afternoon, that quiet, unassuming slice of time, where you are no longer the victim of your circumstances, but the peaceful inhabitant of your own existence. This scene, so boring that the ego scoffs at it, is the very anchor of your reality. To ignore it is to live in a perpetual state of becoming while missing the being that is already staring you in the face. To master the restored afternoon, we must deconstruct the ego's obsession with intensity. Why does the subconscious mind reject the big goal when we try to visualize it? Because the big goal, the mansion, the fame, the instant wealth, is a state of radical departure from your current identity. When you try to force your mind to experience a massive sudden change, the brain senses a threat. It triggers a fight-or-flight response, the physical sensation of resistance. You feel the tightness in your chest, the doubt that screams, "This is not real." How then do we bypass this resistance? We employ the principle of the mundane integration. If you were truly the person who had already achieved your desire, you would not be in a state of high-octane celebration 24 hours a day. You would be doing something boring. You would be folding laundry. You would be walking through a park. You would be reading a letter. You would be doing exactly what you are doing now, but with the quiet, unshakable conviction that the struggle is over. Why is this recursive? Because by choosing a boring moment to inhabit, you remove the ego's need to verify the manifestation. When you visualize $1 billion, your mind asks, how? When you visualize yourself calmly eating dinner in a house you already own, your mind has no questions to ask. It accepts the scenario as a factual possibility. How do we deepen this? We must realize that the feeling of the wish fulfilled is not a high-frequency ecstasy. It is a low-frequency certainty. Think of the most ordinary thing you possess: your name. Do you have to scream your name to feel it is real? Do you have to affirm your name 100 times a day? No. You carry the knowledge of your name with a flat, bored, absolute certainty. That is the vibration of the restored afternoon. It is not a mountain peak. It is the valley floor. It is the deep, heavy, beautiful sigh of one who has finally come home, kicked off their shoes, and realized that there is nothing left to fight. The miracle is not the thing you are waiting for. The miracle is the state of mind that allows you to walk through your ordinary day as if the thing is already settled. In the valleys of the ancient Orient, there lived an elderly gardener named Calin. His garden was the envy of the province, not because it was the largest, but because his harvests were always abundant, even in years of drought. While other farmers were seen running to the temples, chanting and performing frantic rituals to appease the gods for rain, Calin was seen doing nothing of the sort. One year the drought grew severe. The village elders came to Calin, watching him as he calmly mended his wicker baskets, whistling a slow, steady tune. "Calin," they asked, "the fields are brown, the earth is cracked, and the sky is silent. Why do you spend your hours weaving baskets? Should you not be praying or weeping or at least worrying?" Calin looked up, his face lined with the quiet peace of a man who understood the law. "I am not weaving these baskets for the rain," he said. "I am weaving them for the fruit." "But there is no fruit," the elders cried. "There is only dust." Calin simply continued his work. He did not talk about the drought. He did not talk about the lack. He spent his afternoons preparing the space where the fruit would eventually rest. He acted as though the harvest was a settled fact, not because he was delusional, but because he knew the law of growth. He knew that the seed was already in the ground, and that the only thing required of him was the patience to maintain the environment where the seed could express itself. He didn't wait for the fruit to appear to prepare the baskets. He prepared the baskets, and in doing so, he maintained the state of the harvest. When the rains finally came, as they always did, for the season could not be denied, Calin was the only one ready. While the others scrambled in a panic, their baskets broken and their minds frantic, Calin simply walked out into his garden and began to gather. He had been living in the restored afternoon of the harvest long before the first drop of water touched the earth. To integrate this truth, you must stop looking for the big sign. Stop waiting for the world to explode with proof before you allow yourself to feel at peace. Today, pick a moment that represents your restored afternoon. If you seek a healthy body, do not visualize the surgeon's report or the miracle healing. Imagine yourself walking through a grocery store, feeling the cool air on your skin, picking out a piece of fruit, and experiencing the utter, boring, beautiful indifference to the concept of illness. You aren't healing. You are just living. If you seek prosperity, do not visualize the lottery win. Imagine yourself sitting on your sofa, looking at a stack of bills with the calm, flat, unbothered eyes of one who knows they are already paid. It is a moment of total, profound so what. It is the moment when the need to worry has been replaced by the fact of completion. If you are willing to embrace the boring, the ordinary, and the mundane as the true home of your miracle, I invite you to leave a comment below. I am ready for the harvest. I have prepared my baskets. By doing so, you declare that you no longer need the drama of the struggle to feel the presence of your good. You have learned to find the Amen at the end of the prayer, the quiet, heavy certainty that the work is finished. But even as you settle into this peace, the mind will often look back to the how. It will try to calculate the mechanics of your salvation. It will ask, if I am not doing anything, how will the world change? In the next chapter, we shall explore the night watch, the sacred twilight threshold between your conscious day and your subconscious night. We will learn how to surrender your reality to the architect of your own dreaming, and why the quiet hours before sleep are the most potent hours of your life. The afternoon is winding down. The stars are beginning to align. Are you ready to let the subconscious finish the work you have begun? The house is submerged in a deep velvet silence. It is the hour when the world outside loses its definition, dissolving into a monochromatic blur of shadow and silver moonlight. A figure lies upon the bed, the ceiling a vast dark canvas above them. The day has ended, and with it, the exhausting performance of the self has been put aside. There is no audience here, no stage hands to manage, no heavy robes of state to wear. Yet, as the seeker's eyelids grow heavy, a familiar phantom itch begins to crawl along their consciousness. It is the impulse to check. They feel the phantom vibration of a phone that has not rung, the ghost of a worry that has not been addressed, the lingering anxiety of a reality that has not yet conformed to their desires. The paradox is this: the body is weary, the eyes are begging for rest, but the soul is standing guard at the gate of the past, clutching a lantern and peering into the dark, terrified that if it stops watching, the world will cease to exist. This is the threshold of the night watch. It is the most sacred and treacherous territory of human consciousness. To the uninitiated, sleep is merely a biological necessity, a temporary expiration of the personality. But to the architect of reality, the hours of sleep are the construction zone of the soul. It is in this twilight, this thin, oscillating frequency between the waking world and the subconscious depths, that the blueprint of the next day is finalized. The seeker lies there, poised between the light of the conscious mind and the deep, fertile earth of the subconscious, and they must decide, will they surrender to the chaos of their fears, or will they enter the chamber of creation and imprint the truth of their already finished life upon the fabric of the infinite? To master the night watch, one must deconstruct the architecture of the subconscious. Why do we experience the same reality, day after day, with a stubborn clockwork regularity? It is because we fall asleep in the exact same state of mind with which we live our waking hours. We carry our frustrations, our lists of not yets, and our heavy coats of how will it happen into the state of surrender. We essentially tell the creative engine of the universe, continue the pattern. Here is the data of my struggle. Please, build tomorrow exactly like today. How do we invert this? We must utilize the recursive imprinting method. The subconscious mind is not a logical machine. It is a creative void. It does not judge the quality of the image you present to it. It simply accepts the image as the blueprint and begins, with a silent, tireless precision, to weave the physical events of the coming day to match the intensity of your final conscious thought before sleep. Why is the moment of falling asleep so uniquely powerful? Because at this stage, the critical factor, that logical, skeptical, gatekeeping aspect of the ego, begins to soften and dissolve. As the conscious mind fades, the subconscious rises to the surface, unguarded and thirsty for instruction. The how is dissolved in the is. How do we instruct it effectively? We stop using words that describe our desire, and we start using impressions that imply the completion of the desire. If you are lonely, do not think, I want a partner. That is a broadcast of absence. Instead, feel the sensation of a hand resting in yours, or the sound of a voice saying, I am so glad we are home. If you are struggling with debt, do not think, I need money. That is a broadcast of lack. Feel the lightness of a wallet that is closed, because it is no longer being checked for deficits. We are not asking for a favor. We are giving an order to the architect. The recursive nature of this act is simple. The more you occupy the finished state in the moments before sleep, the more your subconscious will manifest those elements in the waking world. And the more the waking world reflects those elements, the easier it becomes to fall asleep in that same state of gratitude. You are not waiting for the night to end. You are using the night to build the day you wish to inhabit. In the kingdom of Seraphina, there lived a legendary architect named Silas. He was commissioned by the queen to build a city that would be the wonder of the world. But there was a catch. Silas was not given stone, wood, or gold. He was told that he had to build the city entirely within his mind first, and that once the blueprint was perfectly solidified in his consciousness, the physical materials would simply appear. For years, Silas was a failure. He would sit at his desk all day sketching frantically, shouting commands at the air, and trying to force the city into existence by the sheer volume of his effort. He was exhausted. The city remained a chaotic mess of half-drawn lines and crumbling mental walls. He was trying to build it from the outside in. One night, exhausted beyond measure, Silas collapsed onto his drafting table. As he drifted towards sleep, he stopped trying to sketch the city. Instead, he simply walked through it in his mind. He felt the cool touch of the marble pillars. He heard the echo of his own footsteps in the great plaza, and he smelled the scent of the orange blossoms that filled the gardens. He did not build the walls. He inhabited the space. He fell asleep in the feeling of being a citizen of a finished city. He woke up the next morning, not with a sketch, but with a profound, calm sense of, "It is done." He went to the site, and the workers were already there, seemingly inspired by a vision they couldn't name. The stone arrived, the masons knew exactly where to place every brick, and the city rose with a speed that defied the laws of time. Silas never went back to his desk to sketch again. Every night he would lie down and walk through a new wing of the city. He didn't build it. He simply occupied the version of the city that already existed in the invisible dimensions. He understood that the physical world was just the shadow of the house he had already finished in the theater of his own consciousness. To integrate this tonight, you must treat your bed as a sacred chamber. Do not bring the debris of your day into this room. As you lie down, perform the closing ceremony of the conscious mind. Let go of the how, let go of the timeline, and let go of the evidence you are missing. Find your restored afternoon scenario, a simple, quiet moment that implies your desire is already a settled fact. Do not try to force a cinematic, high-budget movie of your success. Just inhabit a small, mundane detail. Perhaps it is the feeling of a key in your hand, or the sensation of a body relaxing after a day of work, or the sound of someone saying, "It's all finished now." Repeat this moment over and over with the gentle, rhythmic persistence of a heartbeat. Do not try to make it happen. Simply let yourself fall asleep within the scenario. Fall asleep as the version of you who has already received the gift. If you are ready to use your sleep as the engine of your reality, I invite you to declare your intention in the comments. I am the architect of my own night. The work is finished. By doing so, you set a firm boundary between the day you are leaving behind and the reality you are currently building. You have now reached the deepest level of the mastery, the point where your consciousness becomes the literal cradle of your manifestation. You are no longer just a dreamer. You are a conscious creator of your own future. But even as you master the night, you will face the morning. You will open your eyes, and the old world, the shadow, the echo, the bill, the silence will still be there waiting for you. How do you wake up without losing the dream? How do you remain the sovereign when the mirror tries to steal your memory of the night? In the next chapter, we shall explore the morning defiance, the art of guarding the gates of your perception against the old reality. The city is rising, and the dawn is fast approaching. Are you ready to see what you have built? The sun bleeds over the horizon, a harsh, uncompromising light that drags the world out of the soft, protective anonymity of the night. In the silence of the bedroom, the seeker awakens. For a fleeting heartbeat, there is the lingering residue of the dream, the warmth of the city they walked through in their sleep, the taste of the victory they inhabited. And then, the world rushes back. The light hits the floor, revealing the dust motes dancing in the air. The realization strikes with the weight of a stone. The rent is still due. The silence in the house is still profound. The physical body still carries the ache of its old history. It is the morning paradox. The seeker stares at the ceiling, feeling the gap between the finished work of the night and the unmoved reality of the day. It is a moment of visceral, agonizing tension. It feels as though the universe is mocking them, showing them a world that has failed to change despite the internal revolution of their consciousness. The seeker feels the urge to look at their phone, to check the bank account, to peer into the mailbox of reality to see if the miracle has been delivered overnight. The air in the room feels heavy with the accusation of appearances. It is as if the old self is standing at the foot of the bed, holding a newspaper filled with yesterday's bad news, whispering, "You see, it was just a dream. Nothing has changed. You are still the one who struggles. You are still the one who waits." The seeker is at the threshold. They can either bow to the old shadow, or they can stand in the light of the truth they carried through the veil of sleep. To survive the morning paradox, one must deconstruct the nature of the echo. We are accustomed to believing that the world we see with our physical eyes is the source of our reality. We believe that if we see lack, lack is the truth. We believe that if we see illness, illness is the truth. But this is the fundamental error of the materialist mind. Why is it so difficult to remain in the finished state? Because of the principle of sensory anchoring. Our nervous system is designed to respond to immediate, tangible input. The brain is a survival mechanism, not a creative tool. It prioritizes what it can touch, taste, and measure because it perceives these things as safe and known. When we consciously decide to shift our reality, we are effectively going to war with our own biological programming. How does the process of recursive correction work in this space? When you open your eyes and see the old world, you are looking at the shadow of your past thoughts. You are looking at the wake of a ship that has already turned its rudder. If you look at the wake and say, "The ship is not turning," you are simply misinterpreting the evidence. The ship has turned, but the water takes time to redirect its flow. Why must we be unmoved by appearances? Because if the mirror of life sees that you are moved by the reflection, it is forced to continue reflecting that version of you. The law of the mirror is simple. It is a perfect mimic. If you allow the morning to dictate your mood, you are giving the world the power to dictate your future. How do we reclaim this? By adopting the perspective of the gardener of the dark. When a gardener plants a seed, they do not dig it up every morning to check if it has sprouted. They know that the most vital work is happening in the silence of the soil, hidden from their sight. If they dug it up, they would kill the growth. To look at your current circumstances and demand they change now is to dig up your seed. It is the ultimate act of faithless impatience. You must learn to witness the old world with the same detachment one feels when looking at an old photograph, a relic of a story you have already outgrown. In the deep, ancient scrolls of the astronomers of Ethelgard, there is the story of the star of the returning light. For centuries, the people lived in a long, cold winter, believing the sun had been extinguished. The world was frozen, the crops were dead, and the people grew thin and hopeless. There was one man, an astronomer named Alara, who lived on the highest peak of the tallest mountain. He claimed even in the middle of the darkest year that the sun was not gone. He would stand at his telescope every night peering into the void, insisting that he could see the light. The villagers would climb the mountain and mock him. "Ilara," they would cry, "look at the ground, look at the ice, look at our starving children. How can you talk of light when the darkness is so absolute?" Ilara would look at them with a pitying gaze. "You are looking at the light of a star that is already dead," he would say. "You are looking at the shadow of the winter. But I have calculated the arc of the universe. The earth is turning. The sun has not been extinguished. It is merely hidden by the curvature of our own perspective. I do not look at the ice and call it truth. I look at the math of the universe and call it certainty." He continued his watch for 3 years. He lived in the middle of the ice, but he lived as if the warmth was already touching his skin. He prepared his fields. He dried his grain. He did not act out of the fear of the winter. He acted out of the knowledge of the coming summer. When the morning of the return finally arrived, when the first golden ray crested the peak, melting the ice in a single roaring moment, the villagers were paralyzed with shock. They were not ready. They had spent their time complaining about the cold. Alara, however, walked down the mountain with his tools, his eyes clear and his heart prepared. He did not act like a man who had seen a miracle. He acted like a man who had seen the sunrise. To embody this today, you must master the morning defiance. The moment you wake, before you pick up the phone, before you let the old world demand your attention, stake your claim. Sit in the silence and announce to the architecture of your room, "This is the yesterday I am leaving behind. My reality is already being rewritten." When you face the day when the bills arrive, or the silence persists, or the old pain flickers, do not argue with it. Do not try to fix the shadow. Simply walk through it with the steady, quiet conviction of one who knows the sunrise is inevitable. Treat the old circumstances as an echo, a sound that has already been made and is now fading into nothingness. You are not the victim of the echo. You are the one who has already spoken the new word. If you are ready to stop chasing the shadows of your past and begin living in the light of your inevitable future, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and join our community of intentional creators. By subscribing, you are planting your flag in the new reality, letting the universe know that you are committed to the light. You have begun to see that your circumstances are not the master, they are the debris of your former self. But there is a deeper mystery at play, the mystery of the millionaire's morning. Many think that a life of abundance is characterized by noise, movement, and intensity. But the true masters of reality operate with a different energy entirely. In the next chapter, we shall explore the weight of certainty, the quiet, unbothered, and almost bored routine of those who know that their supply is infinite. The shadow is fading, and the sun is rising on your new life. Are you ready to walk in its warmth? The morning air in the executive suite is still, cool, and carries the faint, crisp scent of expensive parchment and polished mahogany. A man stands at the window, looking down at the city grid, the frantic pulse of humanity, the rush of cars, the millions of souls currently engaged in the desperate, sweaty struggle for their next meal, their next vow. He holds a lukewarm cup of black coffee in his hand. He is a man of significant means, yet he does not check the stock tickers. He does not pace the floor with the nervous energy of the ambitious. He does not scream to the heavens in gratitude or weep with the joy of accomplishment. He is simply bored. The paradox is profound. The world views wealth, success, and the fulfillment of desire as a state of high-octane emotional intensity, a constant flickering neon sign of "I have arrived." But the reality of those who truly possess, those who have anchored their identity in the absolute, is defined by an eerie, tranquil silence. This man does not worry about his supply, because his supply is not a variable he considers. It is a fundamental constant, as reliable as the rotation of the earth. He is not manifesting, he is simply living. If he were to suddenly lose everything, he would likely treat it with the same calm, observational detachment as one watching a storm pass through a window. He does not possess the desire. The desire has become part of the background noise of his life, like the wallpaper or the air in the room. He has transcended the need to be in the state because he has become the state itself. To understand the weight of certainty, we must deconstruct the fallacious belief that faith requires an intense emotional charge. Most seekers believe that to move the universe, they must reach a peak of hysterical emotional vibration. They scream their affirmations, they jump, they dance, they cry, and they exhaust their nervous systems, thinking that this friction is the energy that alters reality. Why is this recursive error so damaging? Because intensity is the hallmark of the newcomer. When you are new to a state, when you are a tourist in the land of abundance, you are amazed, you are loud, and you are volatile. But when you are a resident, you are quiet. How does the principle of thinking from versus thinking of function? When you think of an object, you are positioning it outside of yourself. You are observing it, yearning for it, and confirming its separation from your current experience. This is the radio dial tuned to lack. When you think from the object, you have already moved the dial. You are no longer observing, you are experiencing. If you have $1 million in the bank, you do not wake up every morning shouting, "I have $1 million." You wake up, brush your teeth, and worry about the traffic. The money has become an invisible foundational element of your life. It is the weight in your pocket that you don't even feel until you need to spend it. Why is this state so difficult to achieve? Because the ego equates certainty with stagnation. It fears that if you are not excited, you are not creating. But the truth is that the universe responds to the depth of your conviction, not the volume of your emotional outburst. Certainty is the absence of agitation. It is the amen at the end of the prayer. It is the profound, heavy, beautiful sigh of the one who has finally stopped asking because they know the answer is already in their pocket. To reach this, you must treat your desire not as a prize you are chasing, but as an old, familiar friend you have long since stopped needing to impress. In the days of the golden trade routes, there lived a captain named Julian. He commanded a ship of such scale and complexity that it took miles of open water simply to initiate a turn. When Julian was young, he was a chaotic man. If the winds died down, he would run across the deck, screaming at the sails, barking orders at the crew, and trying to force the ship forward by his own sheer force of will. He was always exhausted, and his ship was always drifting off course. One day, an old navigator took the wheel from him. The navigator didn't look at the sails. He didn't look at the ocean. He simply turned the wheel a few degrees to the port, locked it into place, and then sat down to eat his lunch. "The wind is dead!" Julian shouted. "We are losing time. We must do something." The navigator looked at him, bored. "The wheel is turned, Captain. The ship is massive, and the ocean is vast. It will take time for the weight of the hull to pivot. But the course is set. The ship must reach the port. Why are you running around? You are only wasting your own energy." Julian watched in horror as they sat there for hours, the ship seemingly motionless. He felt the anxiety of the no-results phase, the terrifying silence of the middle ocean. But eventually, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the horizon began to shift. The ship, with the inexorable, crushing weight of its own momentum, began to follow the new heading. It didn't need to be shouted at. It didn't need to be coaxed. It simply obeyed the shift in the wheel. Julian learned the lesson of the great ship. He realized that the weight of his leadership was not in his ability to scream, but in his ability to hold the wheel steady and trust the momentum of the vessel. He stopped running around the deck. He began to walk with the quiet, unbothered grace of a man who knew exactly where the shore was, even when it was still miles beyond the horizon. He became the living embodiment of certainty. To integrate the weight of certainty, you must practice the discipline of the unbothered. Today, when you check your progress, do not look for the high. Do not look for the excitement. Look for the boredom. If you were already the person who had your desire, would you be anxious? Would you be refreshing your email? Or looking for signs? Or asking the universe for permission? You would be doing your work. You would be living your life. You would be unbothered. When you feel the urge to push your reality, stop. Breathe. Recall the image of the captain at the wheel. You have already turned the ship. You have already set the intent. The universe is now moving the massive weight of your circumstances to match the new coordinates. It takes time, and it takes the crushing momentum of your persistent, quiet conviction. Your job is not to move the ship. Your job is to keep your hands on the wheel and refuse to turn it back toward the old, familiar, and comfortable wreckage of your past. If you are ready to stop screaming at the sails and start trusting the momentum of your soul, I invite you to declare it in the comments. The wheel is turned. I am the captain of my certainty. By doing so, you finalize your commitment to the long, beautiful, and inevitable voyage of your transformation. You have mastered the art of the quiet hand and the steady eye. You are beginning to understand that the middle space, the time between the intent and the manifestation, is not a void to be filled with anxiety, but a garden where your faith grows in the dark. But there remains one final, critical test. Many believe that the miracle is an ending the moment the money arrives or the partner appears or the illness fades. But what if the miracle is not an event, but a fundamental, permanent restructuring of your relationship with the divine? In the next chapter, we shall explore the anatomy of the miracle, where we reveal why the slow change is the only change that lasts, and how to finally, completely kick off your shoes and rest. The ship is turning, and the coast is drawing near. Are you ready to see the land? The winter garden is a place of profound, unsettling stillness. The ground is hardened by frost, and the branches of the fruit trees are skeletal, clawing at a leaden, featureless sky. A man walks through this graveyard of growth, his breath forming fleeting ghosts in the biting air. He stops before a patch of earth where he buried a seed months ago. He stands there for a long time, eyes fixed on the frozen soil, waiting for a sign, a sprout, a crack in the crust, anything that would validate his faith. There is nothing. There is only the silence of the earth and the biting cold that seems to mock his persistence. The paradox is haunting. The law of growth is infallible, yet the physical world remains indifferent. If the seed were truly alive, it would show itself, would it not? If the law were truly in effect, the harvest would be visible. The man feels the familiar, seductive ache of the doubter. He looks at his hands, calloused and dry, and wonders if he has been deceived by his own hope. He considers taking up a shovel, digging into the frozen ground to see if the seed is still there, to see if he was a fool, to see if he should abandon the garden for a more sensible pursuit. The garden is the ultimate mirror of the soul's journey. It tests the one thing that the ego cannot fabricate, the capacity to walk through the invisible interval. The world sees the frost and calls it a dead end. The master sees the frost and calls it a transition. This is the anatomical mystery of the miracle. It is not a sudden explosion of magic, but the silent, inevitable culmination of a process that began long before the eyes could perceive it. The frost is not the enemy of the harvest. It is the final, necessary stage of the preparation. To comprehend the anatomy of a miracle, we must deconstruct the temporal fallacy. Why do we equate manifestation with speed? The ego is obsessed with instant results because it equates speed with power. It believes that if a thing does not manifest immediately, the law has failed, or the seeker has erred. This is the recursive trap of the superficial mind. We judge the harvest by the climate of the winter. How does the process actually function? We must recognize the principle of the cumulative shift. A miracle is not a violation of natural law. It is the alignment of consciousness with a reality that has already been prepared in the infinite. When you shift your identity, you are not creating something new. You are turning your frequency to a station that is already broadcasting. But the physical world, constrained by the laws of form, requires a period of refraction. This is the period of the invisible interval. Why does the interval exist? It exists to provide you with the opportunity to solidify your identity. If the world changed the moment you changed your mind, you would never develop the muscle of conviction. You would be a slave to your impulses. By requiring you to walk through the interval to remain faithful, while the world still looks like the old world, the universe is essentially refining your frequency. How, then, does the miracle finally arrive? It arrives when the internal shift reaches a critical mass. Think of the metaphor of a ship at sea. When the captain turns the wheel, the ship does not immediately pivot. The massive weight of the hull and the inertia of the water create a delay. For several miles, the ship continues to track toward the old horizon. A novice on the deck would cry, "The wheel is broken! The course hasn't changed." But the experienced captain knows that the moment the wheel was turned, the destination was effectively reached. The miracle is not the arrival at the port. The miracle is the initial decisive turn of the wheel. The rest is merely the inevitability of momentum. We fail not because the law is slow, but because we grow discouraged by the miles of old ocean that must be traversed before the new horizon comes into view. In the Middle Ages, a guild of stonemasons was commissioned to build a cathedral that would dwarf all others. The project was designed to span 3 generations. The first builders knew they would never see the roof, the stained glass, or the final spire. They would spend their entire lives cutting stone, laying foundations in the dark, and working in a trench. One of the young masons, exhausted by years of toil without seeing a single arch, went to the master architect. "Why do we labor?" the mason asked. "The world sees only a pit. There is no glory here. There is only dust and aching backs. Is our labor in vain?" The master architect did not point to the sky, nor did he offer platitudes about heaven. He led the mason to a side table where the blueprints were laid out. He pointed to the lines, the geometry, the precise placement of every stone in the foundation. "You see a pit," the architect said. "I see a finished cathedral. The stone you lay today is not a pile of rock. It is a structural necessity for the spire that will stand 100 years from now." The miracle is not the moment the bell rings in the tower. The miracle is that we are the ones who have the courage to build it from the ground up with nothing but the vision as our guide. The mason went back to his trench. He changed his state of mind. He no longer labored as a slave in a pit. He labored as a master of the foundation. He understood that he was living in the finished cathedral, even though he was surrounded by mud. When the final stone was laid by his grandson, the cathedral did not suddenly happen. It was simply the completion of the vision that had been held in the mind of the first builder. The miracle was the persistence of the vision through the long, unseen years of the foundation. To integrate this truth, you must become the gardener of the invisible. The next time you find yourself digging up your seeds, checking your bank account with anxiety, arguing with the silence, or lamenting the lack of results, stop. Remind yourself, I am in the period of the foundation. You must act as if the harvest is a settled fact. This is not about pretending, it is about preparation. If you were truly certain of the harvest, you would be clearing the space for it. You would be buying the dress, clearing the shelf, organizing your mind to hold the blessing. Action is the clothing of faith. When you move through your day with the quiet, unshakable confidence of one who is already living in the finished building, so you are not waiting for the world to catch up, you are commanding it to materialize. If you are ready to stop digging up your seeds and start building your cathedral, I invite you to declare it in the comments. I am the builder of the foundation. My harvest is certain. By doing so, you anchor your vision in the present moment, refusing to let the appearance of the frost dictate the truth of your season. You have now reached a profound understanding of the interval, the sacred, silent space where your faith is tested and refined. You are no longer a victim of time. You are the one who dictates its pace. But the journey of the architecture of acceptance is nearing its final threshold. You have moved from the struggle to the acceptance, from the mask to the sovereign, and from the night watch to the builder's trench. Yet, there remains one final, ultimate truth to uncover the truth of the homecoming. It is the moment when the last rag of the old self is shed, and you recognize that you were never the one who was searching. You were the one who was found. The bells of the cathedral are beginning to ring in the distance. Are you ready to walk through the front door? The journey concludes not at a destination, but at the threshold of one's own front door. The seeker stands on the porch of their life, the air cooling as the twilight of their old identity deepens into the night of true self-recognition. They have spent years traveling through the landscape of the architecture of acceptance. They have been the sculptor, the actor, the lighthouse keeper, and the builder of cathedrals. And now, they find themselves holding a key they have possessed all along. The cinematic paradox of the finale is this. The seeker has returned to the very room where they began, yet nothing is the same. The walls, the windows, the furniture, they remain as they were, but the observer has vanished. The weary traveler who began this pilgrimage, clutching the heavy tools of trying and the tattered maps of becoming, is nowhere to be found. In their place stands a being of quiet, luminous stillness. The heavy sigh of relief escapes their lips, not a sigh of exhaustion, but a sigh of release. It is the sound of the prisoner realizing the cell door was never locked. The room is bathed in the soft amber glow of a dying fire. Outside, the world continues its frantic, unceasing churn, but inside there is an absolute, immutable silence. The dream of the life they wanted has ceased to be an object of pursuit. It has dissolved into the fabric of the life they are currently living. There is no longer a distance between the seeker and the sought, between the prayer and the answer, between the actor and the sovereign. The journey has been a circle, and at its end, the realization dawns. The homecoming is not a movement through space or time. It is the cessation of the illusion that one was ever anywhere else. To finalize the architecture of acceptance, we must deconstruct the ultimate, most persistent illusion, the illusion of the separate self. Why have we struggled? Why have we labored? Why have we felt the need to manifest or create? Because we operated under the foundational recursive lie that we are fragmented, incomplete pieces of consciousness trying to get something from a universe that is outside of us. How does the process of homecoming dismantle this? We apply the principle of recursive identity. We ask, who is the one who is manifesting? If the one manifesting is separate from the universe, then the struggle is inevitable, for separation is the definition of lack. But if the one manifesting is the universe experiencing itself in a localized form, then the struggle is a farce. The miracle is not an event that happens to you. It is a recognition of what you have always been. Why is this realization so terrifying to the ego? Because the ego's entire existence is built on the narrative of the hero's journey, the idea that there is a task, a struggle, a growth period, and a climax. If there is no journey, if the house is already yours, if the banquet is already set, if the cathedral is already built, then the ego has no role to play. How do we live from this place of completion? We realize that acceptance is the final state of consciousness. It is the realization that you are not the creator of the reality. You are the canvas upon which the reality is painted, and you are also the painter. You are the radio, the signal, and the station. When you stop tuning the dial, when you stop trying to receive the signal, you realize that you are the sound itself. The homecoming is the moment you stop trying to fix your life and realize that your life is a self-correcting, divine mechanism that functions perfectly the moment you stop interfering with it. You are not a broken thing being mended. You are a divine being experiencing the dream of being broken, and today you are waking up. There is a tale told by the nomads of the Great Sands about a prince who was separated from his caravan during a blinding storm. He wandered for weeks, his royal robes reduced to rags, his skin burned by the sun, and his mind broken by the terror of isolation. He spent his days crying out to the gods, begging for a sign, pleading to be returned to his palace. He dreamed of the cool fountains, the soft silks, and the golden halls he had lost. He wandered until he reached a desolate oasis where he collapsed in the shade of a withered palm. He was near death, his throat parched, his strength gone. He saw a man sitting by the water, a simple traveler who looked at the dying prince with a serene, knowing expression. "I am a prince," the man in rags whispered, his voice cracked. "I have lost my kingdom. I have lost my wealth. I have lost my life. I am praying to be found." The traveler handed him a cup of cool water. "You are not a prince who has lost his kingdom," the traveler said. "You are the king who has been dreaming that he was lost. Your palace is not somewhere over the dunes. Your palace is the ground you are sitting on, seen through eyes that are no longer blinded by the storm." The prince drank the water, and in that moment the dream shattered. He did not suddenly find a caravan appearing in the desert. He did not suddenly see his palace materialize in the sand. But the weight of the desert disappeared. He realized that the palace was not a place he needed to travel to. It was a state of being he had always inhabited, even while he was wandering in the rags. He stood up, and for the first time, he walked not as a lost soul seeking a home, but as a king walking through his own garden. The desert had not changed, but his relationship to it had. He was home, even in the middle of the dunes. To embody the homecoming, you must make the final radical pivot. Stop waiting for the world to confirm your victory. If you are waiting for the bank account to swell, the partner to arrive, or the labels to shift before you accept that you are home, you are still in the dream. Today, sit in the silence and acknowledge that you are the sovereign of your own consciousness. You do not need the reflection to change to know who you are. You do not need the echo to stop to know you have spoken. You are the source. Breathe into the feeling of the final sigh, that deep, resonant sense of being exactly where you are supposed to be, having already received all that you ever could have desired. You aren't doing this. You are remembering it. The door was never locked. The banquet was never empty, and the crown was always on your head. You have completed the 10-chapter arc of the architecture of acceptance. You are no longer the one who searches. You are the one who is. And so, the game is won, the door is open, and your good is here. And so it is. The manuscript is complete, yet the true work, the work of living from this place of sovereign recognition, is only just beginning. You have been given the architecture, the tools, the mirror, and the key. The stage is yours, and the audience is already waiting. You have transcended the struggle, mastered the mirror, and returned to the center of your own being. Go forth, not as one who seeks, but as one who is. The story does not end here. It simply begins to write itself through the power of your quiet, unshakable conviction. You are the architect of your own eternity. Welcome home.